basically states that everything on this universe is frequency. There's emotional, mental, and spiritual. So when you look at the body from a frequency standpoint of view, you see it differently, but you can look at so many different things all at one time, which is really exciting. I'm trying to help people think about the whole world as a frequency and their life as a frequency. So the way I frame it is negative frequencies that are like way over here, and then positive frequencies that are over here. And we don't always have to be at the top positive frequency, but the goal in life is to always be moving forward toward the higher frequency of things.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. And today I'm joined by Sharon Harmon, a holistic health PhD who learned later in life that she's what's considered a highly sensitive person. While this explained a lot about her life, Sharon continued to look for alternative therapies that worked for her and for her health challenges. Ultimately, this led her to the world of frequencies, learning how to reduce the negative ones and add more of the positive ones. Now Sharon works with other sensitive people, helping them understand their body from a different point of view so that they feel better and turn their sensitivities into strength. In today's conversation, we are talking about quantum physics and how becoming aware that we are impacted by the frequencies around us, we can take back and protect our health. Sharon gives us lots of practical tips on how we can incorporate more positive frequencies into our daily lives. Sharon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited for today's conversation, but I would love to hear a little bit. I know your journey started pretty early in life, at least your health journey, your wellness journey did.
Yeah.
Share a little bit of your history and how you came to realize that you were a sensitive person.
Well, it's kind of a long journey, but I'll start at the beginning. And I had what is now known as an autoimmune disease, but I had rheumatic fever as a child. They figured that out after I had lots of aches and pains and all sorts of things, but had throat cultures every month for 6 years on penicillin the whole time. Nothing changed. It was an ordeal, and my parents found out. It was actually my dad, my brothers, and myself all had the same thing. And I had an aunt out in California who introduced them to a naturopathic doctor. They went out there, came back. We changed our diet, and within 1 month, we were feeling way better. Our cultures came back positive. So back then, that was years ago. It was from when I was 10 to 16. And we found out very quickly how important food is. And we weren't eating that bad. Both my parents grew up on a farm. But we changed a few things, and that's all we had to do. But as the world gets more complicated, it's not so easy anymore. So you can't just change your food. And that was before GMOs and all the extra pesticides that they're using. So, but that actually put my mom on the path to becoming a naturopathic doctor. So it was pretty cool. So, but back then, as I grew up, I wanted to do more design work. I was an interior designer. Doing corporate work and construction project management. And eventually I got sick from that, got basically sick building syndrome because I was around all the new furniture, new construction materials. And that started me on my path to looking at things a little bit. People couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. It turned also that I had heavy metal, and Lyme was an underlying thing, which might have been from my childhood that was the underlying thing. I really don't know at this point. But so that started down my journey. But I already learned as a child that the typical allopathic way didn't work for me. So I explored, and my mom in the meantime had learned a lot of things that I was learning as well. So I explored other options and came upon homeopathy and eventually frequency healers that use frequencies to check the body, but also supply the body with frequencies to heal. And that that's worked great because as a sensitive person, you can't hit it hard with meds all the time. That's not always helpful. And even doing IV therapy to take out the metals, that was too harsh for me. So
Sure, that makes sense.
homeopathy and frequency work was the way to go for me. And that eventually led me to becoming a holistic health PhD. And now I help other people because it's important for people to know about.
It is, which is why we're having the conversation.
Yes.
And so let's start with, I have so many questions, but let's
Okay.
start with when you say sensitive person,
Mhm.
what do you mean? Because I have all different, I think of what I think of now versus what I thought of when I was younger, totally different. So what do
Okay.
you mean by that?
Well, I guess it's kind of changed as well because I didn't know anything about that world until I was in my 30s and someone told me I was a sensitive and an empath. So the empath means I take on other people's emotions. Sensitive, I can feel things that other people can. I can feel things faster. So, for example, I just am a early, if it's something's going to happen in this world, I feel it first.
You're the canary. Yep.
Yes. So canary in a coal mine is a good description. So, the food thing, that was pretty early on. That food alone could change your health. But then later on, eventually gluten, I was actually sensitive to GMOs way before GMOs was even in the
Yeah.
media, learned it from eating corn chips. And then eventually gluten, and it's just everything hits me first. And then EMFs, I was an early EMF person, and I think that's a second reason why I had been continuously ill as a child is my parents put an addition on the home, and that room had baseboard heating, and it was one of three rooms in the whole house that had baseboard conductive heating, which is high magnetic fields. And so I was sleeping in a room like that.
Even
um,
internet, Wi-Fi, all the
yes.
things, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting as a fellow sensitive. I as a child, and that was more the empath part, right? To me, being called sensitive was a negative.
Yeah.
Um, as my understanding, however I took it in back then. But it really is a gift. I
Yeah.
can walk into a building and walk right out because I know I
Yeah.
shouldn't spend time in there. And so I love that you have focused your work around this particular group of people, and just also I think changing that conversation of like, hey, wait, this is actually a superpower.
Yeah.
And it's not it's something to embrace, and we can use it as a healing tool. I find by the time people find me, they have initially intentionally and then just over time kind of disengaged from all of those spidey senses.
Hmm.
And so when we can tap into that, the healing can be so much faster.
Yeah, no,
So
I totally agree. I was always introduced as the shy person as when I was little, and I hated that. I was because and then I recognized that when my son was little, he wouldn't jump into a room. He would hang back and
mhm.
observe everything, get
I
used
think
to
that's
the energies,
wise.
I think, and then he would
Yep.
jump in. And that's what I did too. But everyone just called it being shy, which I
Yeah.
really didn't like.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
funny what we so we can but we can change, luckily as we grow,
Yes.
we can
Yes.
change that.
Yeah, and
So
I did, as I healed and got better in my teen years, late in my teen years, went to college, went off. I lived in New York City, and I kind of forgot about that part of myself because I had healed so much of myself. But eventually, I tell people I'm a sensitive with an A-type personality because I really don't know when to stop,
so New
and that's
York
part of
was
the
the best
problem.
place for you.
Yes.
I grew up in New Jersey, so I feel like I'm
Okay.
allowed to say that. Um, I want to talk a little bit about energy and frequency. And,
Okay.
for listeners that are new to this part of the conversation,
Hmm.
um, it's such an important, it is so interesting to me how we're finally having conversations that are thousands of years overdue. If we would
Yeah.
just get back to how humans were created to live, so much, like you said, between
Hmm.
the GMOs and the chemicals and all the things, right? All these inputs and the EMFs and, you know, these are
Yeah.
inputs that but we have not evolved fast enough to handle all these things. So,
No, I
so
agree.
let's talk about our beings as energy beings and what you mean by frequency.
Okay. Well, basically, quantum physics is very fascinating to me. But it's basically states that everything on this earth and this world and this universe is frequency. Tesla discovered it. The various scientists over the years discovered it, and then it was kind of squashed. But every cell in our body resonates at a certain frequency. Every organ, we have energy bodies that emanate out from us. We have our physical body, but then there's an etheric body that's a sheath all around us. And then there's the emotional, mental, and spiritual that go out from there. And they have cameras that can capture some of this. They have cameras that can capture your aura, which is usually colors that are in your energy fields. So we know it's real. It's just in the medical world, we just haven't tapped into it. We have a little bit because we use the EKG and the EEG to check the head, the brain, and the heart. But and the MRI uses magnetic fields as well. But there's so much more. So when you look at the body from a frequency standpoint of view, you see it from a different you see it differently, but you can look at so many different things all at one time, which is really exciting.
Which is amazing. And then, as you mentioned earlier, then we can use frequency as part of the healing process.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is just fantastic. I kind of blurted out a bunch of inputs, and you've mentioned some inputs. Let's talk a little bit about this current modern time and I think there are a lot of things that most people don't think about as they go, if they're not a sensitive or they're not aware that they are, and that
Yeah.
their messages they're getting are actually helpful.
Yeah.
What are things you can share with the audience that they may not even consider that are impacting their health, as related to frequency and energy?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to help people think about the whole world as a frequency and their life as a frequency. So the way I frame it is negative frequencies that are like way over here, and then positive frequencies that are over here. And we don't always have to be at the top positive frequency, but the goal in life is to always be moving forward toward the higher frequency of things. So it could be anything from your food, whether you're eating the sad American diet, the standard American diet, or highly processed foods versus getting organic food or growing your own food or finding a farmer. There's all these levels going up, and drinking tap water versus having a Brita filter versus having a really good filter versus getting it from a spring that's coming down from the mountains.
Yeah.
But you can there's so many things to think about that it makes it exciting, because you can pray over your water and shift it. If this is the only water you have right now, then pray over it and ask God to put positive frequencies into your water. So you can manipulate frequencies with your thoughts, with your words, with so many different things. The big negative frequency in our life, besides food and is the EMFs, unfortunately, in this world, all the wireless radiation, the Bluetooth, the Wi-Fi, the smart meter, all those things are very detrimental to our health. And what I see is that it gets us to a point where we can't tap in to our own self. Like for me, living in New York City, what I learned over a very quick period is I had to get out of the city at least once a month, because I was like this, but I didn't
Yeah.
know what that was all
Why?
about until
Yeah.
later in life. And so I had to decompress, and so I can go back into the city. But all of us are living like that. daily now because there's so much stuff in our homes, in our cars, in our environments. So that's a big one. So reduce, I teach people what I found about 8 to 10 years ago is that even though I'm working with frequencies and helping people, you can't really shift the body unless you also remediate your home and have a safe sanctuary is what I call, especially the bedroom, because that's how detrimental. If you're always fighting that, your body can't do what it needs to do.
I love that. And it's the same, it's a toxin. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the body receives all of these things. And so we have an aligned approach. I always say make your home your haven,
Yeah.
and EMFs and energy definitely count as part of the things that, just like air quality, water quality, you know,
Yeah.
products, all the things. And I just think that that's so important. But I always like to stress when we have these conversations for listeners that, if this is a new conversation, this is just like toxins. Better is better. You already mentioned, right? Like it's not about perfection.
Right.
One human cannot control every exposure. It's about creating that resilience so
Hmm.
that, like you said, like you figured it out, even if you didn't know why at the time. Like if you got out of the city once a month to help your body reset, that
Yeah.
worked. So I just wanted to highlight that for everybody, that better is better. And once we can feel those
Yeah.
inputs, then what you need may be different than what I need.
Right.
Uh,
Everybody's different. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that approach. And
Yeah, people will come to me and say, I can never get to where you're at. I say, well, it took me years to do this. I don't expect you to do it at one time. You just baby steps.
yeah,
And so, yeah, it's a
yeah.
process.
And
Yeah.
I want to go all the way back to the beginning of the conversation
Okay.
with the kind of this from this place of making your home your safe space,
Yeah.
because you mentioned sick building syndrome,
Hmm.
and it wasn't because you were working in, buildings filled with black mold all the time, right? You were
Right.
working with new construction. Things
Hmm.
were off gassing. So I just want to touch on that, because I think that is also an often overlooked part
Yeah.
of, people don't consider, they think new is better.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And that's another conversation I often have. Like someone will also be worse the next time I see them. Well, what did you purchase? Sometimes it was new nightstands, that they're at their bed that they have right next to their bed. But
Right.
all new furniture will off gas, even if unless it's a piece, wood furniture that hasn't been finished and there's no glues being used. But every part of the process, there's either glue used on the seating, like sofas and club chairs and stuff like that. They use a lot of times it's Teflon as the stain protection, and then there's fire protection. So for me, working in office buildings, there was fire protection on all the fabrics, all the carpets. Carpets are really bad, or rugs and carpets in general, unless you get wool or jute or something like that. But even those, if you get them from the wrong place, they can have chemicals sprayed on them. So there's so many things to think about. So buying at a thrift shop is a great thing to do, but then you have to consider molds, which things are getting more moldy these days. And I believe that the EMFs and the wireless radiation are making the mold more proliferous and more dangerous too, creating more mycotoxins.
Well, and there's a lot of science behind that it does make the mycotoxins more active.
Yeah.
And so I do think that's one of the reasons seen. We could go, I don't want to go totally off course,
Yes.
other than to say, yes, indeed, it's, I believe, one of the reasons that, and new homes that are sealed.
Yeah.
And then the
Then the
old homes are
paints and
older.
there's
Yeah.
so much to think about. Yeah. So
So,
it
but
depends.
again, not to be overwhelming. Say
Right.
somebody, so the home I'm in right now, I built 7 years ago. And I
Okay.
was as mindful as I could be about materials and off-gassing and timing and what was used in the home. They thought I was like a crazy person. But
I get that too.
what, again, back to, okay, but we have to live day-to-day life. So if someone wants to buy a new thing and maybe, they're more concerned about if I buy it at a thrift store, it might be moldy and I won't know. Do you have like a tip for if you need new furniture or you are bringing something new into your home or you, God forbid, need a new car?
Yeah.
What are some things people can do to kind of soften the blow?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it really depends on the person and how many. So when you look at like all the different things we've talked about so far, like food, water, your thoughts, positive, negative thoughts, there's just so many things in the world of frequencies to consider. So if you're doing so really good on all these other frequencies, and how much you have to concentrate on the toxins in your home is not as crucial, right? But if you need new carpeting throughout your house, I would suggest you go to wood floors instead, and real wood that's finished with a good quality and a water-based type of finish versus a, more toxic finish. I have to admit that I kept a really old sofa for a really long time because I could not find a quality sofa that wasn't outrageously expensive. But there are places out there that you just ask. Like when you go to
Yeah.
order a sofa, you might not be able to go just to your store down the road and buy it off the showroom floor. Although that would have off-gassed on the showroom floor for a while, you might have to go talk to them and special order a sofa that has no fire retardants and no stain resistance, and look at the foam quality, and just the manufacturers are getting smarter. They know people want this stuff, so you just
Yeah.
have to be smarter at asking questions.
And save up a little longer
Yeah.
because they also
Yes.
know they can
Yes.
charge more for it. Unfortunately, I mean, which is ridiculous because it's just got less junk added to it, but we have to pay
Yeah.
extra for
I
that.
have to
But
agree. One of the worst things is the sofa. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Is the mattresses that we sleep on, because by law they're supposed to have two types of fire retardants on them, and that's very toxic. So, getting a used mattress from somebody that you trust would be good. They're more expensive again though, a latex, natural latex mattress,
mhm.
or at least get a quality covering to put over your existing mattress. I mean, I've had people that you can buy some plastic coverings that you can put over the mattress, and then you get a quality mattress pad, like a organic wool. So that'd be way less expensive than a mattress itself. So there's hacks
Yeah,
in
and
between
and
there.
I think in that world as well, even maybe more so than, the rest of the household furniture, there are definitely companies that are
Yeah.
targeting people like you and myself who are, that we're going to buy a natural latex or, like
Yeah.
because we know how many hours a night we spend on our bed.
That's
So,
true.
which I get is not always an option. So I love that you gave listeners some tricks, some hacks for, okay, let's work with what we have.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little. This is where we're going to get what some people are going to think is woo-woo, and it's
Okay.
science. I know it's science. Back
Okay.
to quantum physics. None of these ideas are new.
Right.
Humans have known these things for thousands of years. We just kind of forgot along the way.
Yeah.
Um, how, let's talk about thoughts and the power of the frequency of thoughts, because I truly believe, just like you can change your water,
Hmm.
you know, um, and you kind of alluded to it already too. Some of these things, this barrage of inputs, become less important if we use our thoughts, if we're
Yeah.
intentional. So let's talk a little bit about that and how it's real. It's not, this isn't, just made up woo-woo stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think, if someone's just sat still for a minute and imagine someone saying hate, to you, you feel that, right? So that is the frequency of the word. And versus someone saying, I love you, you feel good when that happens. So that's an easy example, but there's a book called Power versus Force. I don't know if you read
Yeah.
that, but he grades all the different emotions on and puts love at the very top, peace, all what we normally would know of as positive frequency words. But
I've
the
read
more
all
we
of his
can,
books. I
yeah,
love
okay. They're good. But the more we can say positive things to us, if you look in the mirror and you have a pimple and you're like, oh no, my pimple, you just say, oh, you have beautiful skin, say positive things to
Right.
yourself. Oh, thank you for going away quickly, using different language in your life can really shift. That alone could shift a lot of things. Because just always constant, like if you are ill, and we all get sick, I do too, but if you concentrate on that illness instead of concentrating on your beautiful body that's self-healing and is made to regenerate, then it's a totally different picture.
Say that again, the self-healing part. It's how we're designed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I love that. I really, I like to offer, especially when I'm working with clients, and again, because we're focused on a healing journey,
Mhm.
just think of the placebo effect. Like if this is a new conversation and you are having trouble buying in that this is science and this is real, the
Yeah,
placebo effect has been studied in medicine for a long time, and it is literally the power of your thoughts.
yeah,
And just like you said, there's placebo effect. A lot of people haven't heard about the nocebo effect,
yeah,
which is when you have that negative expectation. Well, guess what? Guess what's going to happen? And
that's true.
so I think that this is where anybody, no matter where you're living, what your environment is, I almost said what you're eating. I mean, there are certain steps we can take for
Yeah,
sure. Um, but I think every other change that we make works exponentially better when we're focused on as well the thoughts and the
yeah,
frequencies of and becoming aware of that like what is that self-talk? Because
yeah.
those messages are running. Our cells are receiving the messages, whether we're conscious of them or not.
No, that's true. And another part I wanted to bring up is that like people will come see me and they identify with their sickness so much that
Oh,
that is part of that. If they say
yes.
I have Lyme disease, I try never to use the word disease after Lyme because I've
Yeah.
had Lyme. But it's just microbes that are in your body that you have to
It's
deal
just
with that you
why
shouldn't
didn't your
identify
body,
with it.
yeah,
Yeah.
kick it out? No,
Yeah.
I do think that becomes with any kind of chronic health struggle.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are like, "Oh, will you work with me if I don't have a diagnosis?" I'm like, "Yes, let's not get one. Let's
Yes.
just." Because then we do have to intentionally do that work to then separate
Yeah.
ourselves and realize that we are not our illness, and the more we identify with that, the more stuck we're going to stay.
Yeah.
I was there. That was me. I walked around for over a decade identifying with
Mm,
a label that was given to me, believing I couldn't heal and would decline because that's what I was told. So of course that's what
yeah.
happened, you know.
Yeah.
But once I shifted that perspective, it's, again, I think,
Yes.
yes, there are certain things, actions we need to take, but this one is to me where all the power is because when you're in that place where you don't believe you can heal,
Mhm.
then why bother avoiding the gluten or the corn or
Yeah, no, you're
like,
right.
yeah. And
You're
and
right.
so
And
listen
that's
to
one of the
Sharon.
energy tools I like is muscle testing. I don't know if you use muscle testing yourself, but
In my
um,
personal life, I do.
okay. And I actually have a course on my website if people want to learn to do it themselves. But you might think you want to get healthy, but unless you can muscle test yourself or have someone else muscle test you to say yes, you really believe it, it's a totally different story. So it's a good tool to have for lots of reasons, but that's one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great, and for people that want to play with it, even the power of the words, right? Like you can just
Yeah.
start muscle testing frequencies that way with
Yeah.
language where
Hmm.
you're not emotionally attached to any outcomes, or
Yeah.
it can be a really great tool. I'm
Yeah.
guessing this is now people are gonna be like, really? I'm guessing when you choose produce, like when you are you tuning into frequencies in your day-to-day life, like as you go, do you ever pick up food and make a choice of like which one feels like the one you want to bring home and eat?
Yes, sometimes you'll find me in a grocery store putting my purse on the floor and holding what's the best option. Yeah, because
Okay.
sometimes it's not always the organic one that's the best, to be honest with you. I don't do it
Right.
all the time, but even if you go to the store, go to the store to get probiotic, for example, and there's 20 different probiotics. Which one do you pick? So
Right.
muscle testing is a really good tool so you can narrow it down. But I
Okay.
also wanted to mention flower essences. I don't know if you've talked about that on your show at all,
I
but
have not.
because I put that in, homeopathics, flower essences, I put in this, frequency toolbox because flower essences is the frequency of a flower. So let me just quickly describe. So the way
Please.
flower essence was made, they've been used by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, but that was rediscovered by an intuitive doctor called Dr. Bach. So most people know him as Bach flower remedies, but there's way more than that, just those. But they put a cut flower in water in the sun, and the energy or frequency of that flower goes into the water. And they found using testing it on a lot of different people that certain flowers helped with certain mental, emotional, spiritual things with a person. So it's similar to the homeopathy and that cures like, that's a typical saying in homeopathy. But flower essences are amazing, especially when you cannot get your thoughts, your negative stuff to flip. It sounds good to say, yeah, I need to say all positive words to myself, but sometimes you just can't get there and you need a little help. And that's where flower essences are amazing.
And is that something that somebody like yourself needs to guide people on, or can they just learn to figure out what might be helpful for them?
There's um there's multiple ways to use it. So there's book, I don't have the book near me, but there is a book that is one of the most comprehensive ones, but you can buy a book and read through them, or the book I have describes each flower essence, at least the Bach ones, and tells you what they're good. Like this flower essence is good for these things. And then the back of the book will give you the symptoms or the thoughts versus the flower essence. It divides it that way. So you could
Nice.
just flip through and see what calls to you. Like there's maybe five that are best for grief, for example, but each one's a little bit different. So then you look which one is, so there's different ways you can muscle test and just say, yeah, from this page to this page, which, is
Right,
best.
right.
I like using them in combination because when you use them in combination, then you see a whole shift,
Well, because
totally
we're
different type.
kind of complex.
That is right.
Where does one find flower essences?
Good question. Some of the health food stores carry those.
Okay.
Bach is, again, the most, if you go to a health food store and ask for Bach flower remedies, that would be the thing to ask for. You can get them online.
Trusted
Um,
brand. Yeah.
yeah, but
Okay.
there's way more. I mean, Australian ones, there's Hawaiian ones, there's all sorts of Alaska ones, all over the world.
I love
Yeah,
that. Again, it's back to the things that humans have known,
yeah,
and we've gotten away from that, maybe just because there's so many of us now, we're not living in villages anymore.
yeah.
Um, so I love that a lot of these almost lost healing arts we're now realizing again out of necessity. And
Hmm.
I say this all the time, listeners that if they're familiar with my life at all, they know, I'm my life partner is a DO. I am not anti-medicine
Yeah,
at all, although he's a functional medicine practitioner. So his toolbox is bigger than your
yeah,
typical, family doc, which is how he started out. But I say it all the time, if I need surgery, I know where I'm
Yeah.
going. I'm
Yeah.
not going for acupuncture. I'm not going to be reading and hunting down the right flower essence. This is what Western medicine is really good
Yeah.
at, acute care, period.
I totally agree. Yeah.
But the rest of the stuff is missing.
Yeah.
And crazy enough that 15 years ago when I was asking could food be impacting my autoimmunity? No,
Yeah.
no, that seemed crazy back then. So if you're thinking like flower essence, how is that? We're just getting back to nature, and we
Yeah.
need to use more of these tools now because our level of inputs are so big.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
yeah, I love
And
it.
nature is key. I mean, that's the key to the EMF part of it too. You have to, be outside, ground, and be in the woods and garden with your bare hands and yeah, all sorts sun gaze when it's
Say
going up
all
and
of
coming
that
down.
again.
Yeah.
I do think, and everyone can do it. I've written articles about this. Even if you live in the city,
Yeah.
there are parks in every city. You can find earth to stand on.
Yeah.
People, I just had somebody, oh, I realized I forgot to answer the message. Somebody reached out and was like, well, where can I do you have, it was a request for like a grounding mat or blanket or something. Did I have a brand I
Okay.
recommend? And I'm like, I recommend the free one. Just go stand on the earth. Like it's really that simple. Now, I
Yeah.
love toys and gadgets.
Me
Um,
too.
I we enjoy our coffee every morning in front of the biocharger because I'll take any boost I can. But again, so frequency, yes, I not
Yeah.
only believe, once you play and really start to take a little bit of control back, you can feel. I don't think you have to be a sensitive to learn to tune in and
Yeah.
feel. I just think, that some of us definitely are more sensitive, but I think everybody, it's kind of like so many children get creativity taught out of them in school. And
Yeah.
then we're, as adults trying to get that back into our lives. It's the same thing. Like I think a lot
No.
of people don't listen. It's not that they can't, they just haven't.
Yeah. And I think it can be trained, but we all have different levels of it. But if you're
Sure.
constantly bombarded by, again, the negative energies or frequencies, then your body isn't open to receive those, yeah,
Yeah.
messages. Yeah.
So, and we kind of danced around it. You talked about this kind of spectrum, if you will, of like, negative frequencies are all the way at one end and positive are at the other.
Hmm.
And, it's not about always being top end positive.
Right.
So I take that as, but I want you to speak a little bit more to, again, that kind of compensating. And you did mention it earlier, but um, let's just dig a little further into it. Doesn't need to be perfection, and of course we know there are going to be negative inputs. So, do you have tips for if somebody's starting, or how do you work with your clients on figuring out, okay, where can they up level to stay in that what I would call a safer range?
Okay. Well, I have the benefit of there's frequency. Let me just start with this because there's frequency practitioners all over the world. It's more popular in Europe, for example, than it is here, but there's a lot. Learning of more and meeting more and more all over the country here in the US as well. But when you work with a frequency practitioner and they check the body, since like I mentioned earlier, every organ has a frequency, you can check so many things in the body just through a library of frequencies that you have. And when I can see what's going on that way, then it gives me then I can make a more individual recommendation. But and I do have a freebie on my website for 9 positive frequencies you can add to your daily life. So that might be helpful for some people.
Nice.
but it's really based on the person. The number one, in my mind, if you can start cleaning up your food, one step at a time, depending on where you are on the range. Like getting preservatives out, stop eating things with dyes, reduce your sugar, doing all the baby steps that most of us know at this point what we should be doing. Maybe not everybody, but that's pretty easy to find. But EMFs, I find, are the biggest culprits in our life. And if we can really reduce that, and the most important is to make your bedroom a safe place. No electronics in the bedroom, nothing plugged in your bedroom, not being by the smart meter in your house. I assume most people know what a smart meter is, the electrical meter on the house. Like that's happened to us. My husband started having insomnia even years ago before smart meters came out because he was sleeping with his head with the electrical meter right on the other side of the wall. So, the more, and turning off Wi-Fi at night is huge. It's really, really important. So I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of went all over the place.
You did. I know. Well, it's so much depth to the topic.
Yeah.
No, you did. I love actually that I wouldn't have said all over the place, but, because we're never done. And as a coach, I'm always, you start with where you can get the win. Like you said, if you haven't started cleaning up diet yet to move toward a supportive, whole, real food diet, start there, right? Like pick the things where you can create the win. But then, to me, it's also important because sleep, we can't heal if we're not getting good quality sleep.
Yeah.
And so I think the more that people hear, people used to roll their eyes at me when I, would say, well, my Wi-Fi's on a timer, because I am not the person who's going to, even me, I'm not going to go out every night and flip the breaker. I'm not.
Yeah.
And there are people who do, so for the listeners that are like, what do you mean nothing plugged in the bedroom? I have friends that they shut down the power to their bedroom every night.
Yeah.
That's not the choice I made for how I protect myself while I sleep. But, and the smart meter thing, I have had two clients over the years that one was actually the client and one was the client's daughter. They both lived in apartment buildings, and when smart meters went up, and they didn't realize was on one, the outside of the bedroom wall. And so I love that you brought that. I mean, those are things that we can control and are so important, what we're putting in our body. And are we allowing our bodies that recovery of good sleep? So
that's key.
Yeah, I love that. And again, you don't have to do all of it at once.
Yeah.
I always say, start with the win or like the biggest hit. Like when people want to clean up their products in their home, I always start with laundry detergent because everything you touched, was touched by your laundry detergent. So
that's
go
a good
for
one.
the big hit, and pick one thing in this conversation that A, can do, and B,
that's probably one of the top, products in the home to change out, because you're not only making your home you're making your clothes toxic, you're making your home toxic, but you're also making your neighborhood toxic. I mean, I've gone on walks and I'm like, oh, I smell the dryer sheets. I gotta go back home.
It's awful. It's awful. We could hang out. We could grocery shop together. We could go for walks together. This is one of the reasons. I mean, walk anywhere you can. I am blessed to live in a place where I can walk and not walk past anybody's dryer sheets.
That's good.
It's bad. It is.
Yeah.
I actually, my daughter was living in the UK last year, and we were in Oxford visiting her, and somebody trying to be nice to me threw my clothes in. I brought laundry detergent with me, but they threw my clothes in the washer at the Airbnb where we were staying, and dryer. And I threw the clothes out when I got home, and they were clothes I loved, but there was no way I was going to get that out of those clothes, I would never be able to wear them again. I
Yeah.
tried first. I washed them several times at home.
Yeah, it takes a lot. Yeah.
It just,
Yeah.
so,
Well, actually, that's another thing we could talk
yeah,
about real quick is the clothes dynamic between positive and negative, because most people don't realize that all the polyester in our clothes is really plastic. It's the exact same chemicals. So when they're starting to talk about the stretch pants and yoga pants and
uh-huh.
stuff like that, but it's anything. If you're wearing your polyester shirt, and you're sweating in it, you're getting the chemicals from that shirt in your body and you're from your shoes. There's so many. You just have to start being conscious about your clothes. Cotton, going back to the nature again, cotton and wool and linen and silk are the top fabrics you should be wearing.
Yep. And again, just like what we
One
talked
step at a
about,
time.
but like we talked about earlier, there are companies that are starting to use organic cottons and things
Yeah.
to make, I think I wrote an article about this one too, but what people probably have heard about are BPAs
Yep.
but don't be fooled by just it's not BPAs are just the bisphenol A is a known horrible chemical that's in so many things.
Yeah.
I would not it's kind of like the plastic water bottle that says BPA free. Well, it just has other awful
Yeah. They just
plasticizers
substituted
in
one
it.
chemical for
Yeah,
another. Yeah, I
yeah, because they
agree.
can. So, but the exciting thing is that there are companies that are making organic cotton
Yeah.
clothing that, I won't say brand names, but they're comfy
Yeah.
and they're cute and
Yeah.
um, it is worth again if you're at that place where you're like, all right, I have the house nailed down. I've got food,
Yeah.
and I'm working on my thoughts. And okay, then I love it. Start cleaning up your wardrobe, or at least just considering,
Yeah.
what kind of
And one of
materials.
my mentors, if you do, it's hard, it's more expensive to buy organic cotton, but if you buy regular cotton, just know that it has GMO cotton in there, a lot of pesticides likely.
Yeah,
But I haven't personally muscle tested, but I know somebody who has that you can wash it. Typically, you can wash it 6 times and most of the worst of it's out of there. So that's a good tip too.
that is a good tip. Back to just, what do we do with what we have?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And also, if you think about, I don't know, maybe this goes back to being called sensitive ever since I was a child. That to me, the cotton and linen and silk, they just feel better on me. Like I
Yeah.
feel happier in those fabrics.
Yeah.
And I never really gave it such deep thought before. So
That's
yeah.
true. And there's a good documentary called Stink, if anybody wants to learn more about it, the clothing part.
I love that. I'm going to check it out. I haven't seen that one. Amazing. So we're at that point
Okay.
where even though you've already sprinkled in tips all the way through, what is one step that listeners can take starting today to improve their health?
Um, I think I'm going to go back to the EMF part because turning off your Wi-Fi, even if you don't touch your electrical system, that's a whole different topic. But just the Wi-Fi alone can turning that off at night when you sleep is a game changer because your brain drains while you sleep, your body regenerates and detoxifies itself, and the less interference energy that your body gets, the more you'll feel better in the morning when you wake up. It could shift your sleep, it could shift how you feel in the morning, it could shift your negative negative to positive emotions because you're not bombarded all night long, It could change so much.
I love that. And am I doing it wrong if I have just a timer set up so that I don't have to think about it every night?
Yeah, timer's fine. We actually, and so if you want to take it to the next level, then we went out of our way to wire our house so that we don't use the Wi-Fi. Once in a while, we'll
Sure.
turn it on when my husband wants to use his iPad, but
Yeah.
otherwise we have everything wired. So there's so many steps in between, but just doing that at night and keeping your cell phone out of your room too. You don't want anything wireless in your room.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Amazing. Sharon, for people that are listening on the go and aren't going to check the show notes, where's the best place for them to find you?
Well, it's easy. It's my name, SharonHarmon.com. You can find me there, and I have all sorts of, I've been blogging for years. I think I counted it was 10 years recently, been blogging for years. So there's lots of free information. If you type in EMFs in the search, even you'll get a lot of EMF articles if you want to learn more about that. Because I do harp on that quite a bit. EMFs and frequencies, all interconnected. And I have some freebies on there and courses. I'm about to come out with a sensitive children's course. So it will include a lot of this information and more. So
I wish that was around when I was a kid.
Yes.
and my mom would have taken it. I love it. And really check out Sharon's website. She's not kidding about the amount of articles and the depth there is, there's just lots of value. And I would say anybody who's leaning in, get connected. The work you're doing is so important, and the world has never needed it more.
Yeah. I think it's the way of the future. It's just we're not there yet. But the more people know and start thinking this way, it's the better. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
For everyone listening, remember you can get those transcripts and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.